Behind the lavish costumes and royal romance of this 1953 Tudor drama lie jaw-dropping secrets that even history buffs don't know. From real-life married couples playing lovers on screen to bizarre production delays involving Howard Hughes and a spelling error that made it to the final cut, the making of this film was as dramatic as the story itself. Here are the 15 weird facts you didn't know about Young Bess. Fact 1. Real-life spouses playing on-screen lovers. Imagine having to film romantic scenes with your own husband while dozens of crew members watch your every move, and you'll understand exactly what Gene Simmons experienced on the set of Young Bess. When the cameras rolled in 1953, Simmons and her co-star Stuart Granger weren't just playing lovers on screen. They were actually married in real life, which created an unexpectedly awkward situation for the actress. The couple had tied the knot on December 20th, 1950 in Tucson, Arizona, and by the time they filmed Young Bess together, they were still in the early years of their marriage. Interestingly, their relationship had actually begun years earlier when they first met in 1946 while working on Caesar and Cleopatra, though at that time Simmons was only 18 and Granger was still married to someone else. They reconnected later and eventually appeared in a film called Adam and Evelyn in 1949, where Granger played a man in love with a younger woman, which eerily mirrored their own real-life situation. When Young Bess came around, Simmons openly admitted to feeling uncomfortable about the romantic scenes, saying she felt more self-conscious about playing love scenes with him now than she did before they were married. Despite her admitted awkwardness, their chemistry on screen was undeniable and added an authentic layer to the forbidden romance between the young Elizabeth and the dashing Thomas Seymour. The couple would go on to appear together one more time in Footsteps in the Fog in 1955 before eventually divorcing in 1960, ending both their professional partnership and their 10-year marriage. Fact 2. Stuart Granger's real name. Confusion. The leading man who played the dashing Thomas Seymour in Young Bess wasn't actually named Stuart Granger at all, which created one of Hollywood's most unusual cases of mistaken identity. Born on May 6, 1913, in Kensington, West London, the actor's real name was James lavish Stewart, a perfectly respectable name that would have served him well in almost any profession except for one small problem. There was already a massively famous James Stewart working in Hollywood. By the late 1930s, the American actor James Stewart was becoming one of the biggest stars in the movie business, which meant that when the British James Stewart began his acting career, he faced an impossible situation where audiences and industry professionals would constantly confuse the two men. The solution came from his Scottish grandmother's family, as he adopted the surname Granger to distinguish himself from his American counterpart, though his friends and family continued to call him Jimmy throughout his entire life. What makes this situation even stranger is that Granger himself acknowledged the absurdity of the name change. And despite building a successful career under his stage name, he later admitted in interviews that he found the whole Hollywood system rather ridiculous. The name change was purely practical rather than artistic, as there were no deep personal reasons or creative motivations behind choosing Granger. It simply happened to be available and came from his family tree. His full birth name actually included lavish as a middle name, which came from his great-great-grandfather Luigi Lavish, a famous Italian-French-Irish opera singer who had been Queen Victoria's singing master, giving the actor an impressive artistic lineage that most people never knew about because he performed under an entirely different name. Fact 3. Charles Laughton's 20-year encore performance. Charles Laughton had the bizarre distinction of playing King Henry VIII, not once but twice in major Hollywood productions, with exactly 20 years separating his two performances as the notorious Tudor monarch. His first portrayal came in 1933 with The Private Life of Henry VIII, a performance so memorable and commanding that it earned him the Academy Award for Best Actor, making him the first British actor to win an Oscar and cementing his place in cinema history. When MGM began casting Young Bess 2 decades later, they decided to bring Laughton back to play the same character, creating one of the strangest casting decisions in Hollywood history, where an actor essentially reprised an Oscar-winning role after such a long gap. By the time he returned to the role in 1953, Lawton was older and even more imposing, which actually worked perfectly for the film since Henry VIII was supposed to be in his declining years, suffering from various health problems and becoming increasingly paranoid and cruel. The director reportedly used a subtle but disturbing visual motif throughout the film, showing Lawton's Henry gently caressing the necks of his doomed wives, including Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard, as a sinister reminder of their eventual fates under the executioner's axe. Even though Lawton only appeared briefly in Young Bess compared to his extended performance in the earlier film, his presence dominated every scene he was in, and his portrayal remained so definitive that he essentially became Hollywood's official King Henry VIII. This typecasting was both a blessing and a curse, as while it proved his mastery of the role, it also meant that whenever filmmakers needed a Henry VIII, Lawton was the automatic choice, forever linking him to the bloated, wife-killing monarch in the public imagination. Fact 4. Howard Hughes nearly derailed everything. The production of Young Bess was almost destroyed before it even began, thanks to one of Hollywood's most powerful and eccentric figures, the billionaire aviator and studio owner, Howard Hughes. When Jean Simmons moved to Hollywood in 1950 with her new husband Stuart Granger, her contract was sold by J. Arthur Rank to Hughes, who then owned RKO Pictures, and this business transaction quickly turned into a nightmare that would haunt the actress for years. Hughes, who was notorious for his obsession with beautiful actresses, became personally interested in Simmons and made it clear that he wanted to pursue a romantic relationship with her, despite the fact that she was newly married and completely uninterested in his advances. When Simmons refused Hughes and remained faithful to her husband, the vindictive studio boss began systematically sabotaging her career by refusing to loan her out to other studios for important roles and deliberately delaying the production of Young Bess, which MGM desperately wanted to make with her in the lead role. The situation became so tense that Stuart Granger finally intervened directly, calling Hughes on the phone and angrily telling him, in no uncertain terms, to leave his wife alone, or there would be serious consequences. Simmons and Granger eventually took Hughes to court in 1952, and they won the case, freeing her from his control through an out-of-court settlement that required her to make one more film for no additional money and agree to be loaned out for 3 more pictures. This legal battle caused significant delays to Young Bess, pushing back its production by months and forcing MGM to wait anxiously while one man's inappropriate personal interest held up an entire major motion picture. Fact 5. Anne Boleyn's name misspelled. One of the most embarrassing mistakes in Young Bess involves the very first person mentioned in the entire film, and somehow this glaring error made it all the way through production, editing, and final release without anyone catching it. Anne Boleyn, the ill-fated second wife of King Henry VIII and the mother of Queen Elizabeth I, had her name consistently misspelled as Anne throughout the movie, appearing incorrectly in both the opening prologue that sets up the story and in the closing credits where the cast is listed. This wasn't just a minor typo that appeared once or twice. The simplified spelling was used every single time her name appeared on screen, which is particularly strange considering that Anne Boleyn is one of the most famous figures in English history, and her correct name spelling is well documented in countless historical records and books. What makes this mistake even more baffling is the sheer number of people who would have seen these credits during production, including the director George Sidney, producer Sidney, Franklin, the screenwriters, the entire editorial team, and presumably dozens of other crew members and studio executives who reviewed the film before its release. The actress who played Anne Boleyn in the brief opening scenes was Elaine Stewart, and even she would have seen her character's name spelled wrong in the credits without anyone apparently raising concerns about the error. MGM was known for its meticulous attention to detail and lavish production values, making this oversight seem almost impossible. Yet there it remained in every print of the film that went out to theaters in 1953, silently misspelling the name of one of history's most tragic queens for audiences around the world to see. Fact 6. The missing Roman holiday connection. Jean Simmons came heartbreakingly close to landing one of the most iconic roles in cinema history. But Howard Hughes' vindictive behavior cost her the opportunity of a lifetime, and changed the course of Hollywood history. The legendary director William Wyler was absolutely amazed by Simmons's performance in The Blue Lagoon from 1949, and specifically wanted her to play Princess Anne in his upcoming romantic comedy Roman Holiday, which Paramount Pictures was producing for release in 1953. This role would have been perfect for Simmons, as it required exactly the kind of grace, charm, and acting ability that she had demonstrated throughout her career, and Wyler was convinced that she was the ideal choice for the part. However, Howard Hughes, who controlled Simmons's contract through RKO Pictures, flat out refused to loan her to Paramount for the film, using his power over her career as a weapon to punish both her and her husband, Stuart Granger, for rejecting his romantic advances and standing up to him. Hughes' refusal meant that Paramount had to search desperately for a replacement, and they eventually cast a relatively unknown actress named Audrey Hepburn, who was appearing in small roles on Broadway at the time. The role of Princess Anne turned Hepburn into an overnight sensation, earning her the Academy Award for Best Actress and launching one of the most beloved careers in film history. Meanwhile, Simmons was forced to fulfill her obligations to Hughes by appearing in films like Angel Face with Robert Mitchum, and while she delivered excellent performances in these movies, none of them had the cultural impact or career-defining magic of Roman Holiday, leaving everyone to wonder how different both actresses' careers might have been if Hughes hadn't interfered. Fact 7. Oversized furniture as director's trick. Director George Sidney employed a clever but bizarre visual technique throughout Young Bess that most viewers probably never consciously noticed, even though it subtly influenced how they perceived the main character and her struggles. Sidney deliberately filled many of Elizabeth's scenes with furniture that was drastically oversized compared to normal proportions, creating an almost surreal visual effect where Jean Simmons appeared tiny and overwhelmed by her surroundings. The most striking example of this technique appears in one particular scene where Elizabeth sits in a massive chair that was specifically built to be twice her actual size, making her look like a small child sitting in an adult's furniture rather than a young woman coming of age in the dangerous world of Tudor court politics. This wasn't an accident or a mistake in set design. Sidney planned these oversized props carefully and intentionally to create a specific psychological effect on the audience, making viewers subconsciously feel that Elizabeth was dwarfed by the enormous forces and events taking place around her. The director understood that the young princess was essentially powerless in a world controlled by powerful men, where her father could execute her mother on a whim, where her very survival depended on staying out of dangerous political intrigues, and where one wrong move could mean imprisonment or death. By surrounding Simmons with furniture and props that made her appear physically small and vulnerable, Sidney reinforced these themes without having to spell them out through dialogue or exposition. The technique was subtle enough that it worked on an almost unconscious level, and even today, when viewers watch the film, they might feel that Elizabeth seems overwhelmed and vulnerable without quite understanding why the filmmakers succeeded in creating that impression so effectively. Fact 8. An 11-year-old New Yorker's British debut. Young Bess marked the very first film appearance of Rex Thompson, who was only 11 years old when he took on the challenging role of Prince Edward VI, the sickly young king who would die at age 15 after a brief and troubled reign. What makes Thompson's casting particularly remarkable is that he had absolutely no British heritage or connection to England whatsoever. He was born and raised in New York City, making him about as American as a child actor could possibly be. Despite this complete lack of cultural background for the role, Thompson delivered what reviewers described as a truly engaging and convincing performance as the ill-fated young monarch, managing to capture both the boy's royal bearing and his underlying fragility and sadness. The fact that an 11-year-old American kid could step into his first movie role and successfully portray an English prince from the 1600s speaks volumes about both his natural talent and the skill of the director and acting coaches who worked with him on set. Thompson's performance was so effective that audiences completely accepted him as the legitimate heir to Henry VIII's throne, never questioning whether this young actor belonged in Tudor England or noticing any hint of American accent or mannerisms breaking through. His success in Young Bess launched a brief but memorable film career, and he would go on to work with Deborah Kerr again just 3 years later in The King and I, where he played Louis Leonowitz, the son of Kerr's character Anna, creating an interesting situation where he played the son and stepson of the same actress in 2 different period films. Thompson's ability to master the complex dialogue and emotional depth required for Prince Edward at such a young age, without any prior film experience, remains one of the most impressive casting successes in the entire production. Fact 9. 5 starring roles in 1 year, Jean Simmons had one of the most extraordinarily productive years any actress has ever experienced in Hollywood, appearing in an astonishing 5 different films that all hit theaters during 1953. This unprecedented output began with Angel Face, a dark psychological thriller directed by Otto Preminger, where she played a manipulative and potentially murderous young woman opposite Robert Mitchum, demonstrating a completely different side of her acting range. Next came Young Bess, where she portrayed the young Elizabeth I in a lavish historical drama, followed immediately by The Robe, the first film ever shot in CinemaScope, where she played the romantic lead opposite Richard Burton in an epic biblical story. She then appeared in The Actress alongside Spencer Tracy, playing aspiring performer Ruth Gordon in what would become one of Simmons's personal favorite films despite its disappointing box office performance, and finally rounded out the year with Affair with a Stranger, a romantic drama with Victor Mature that she made to fulfill her settlement obligations with Howard Hughes. The sheer variety of these roles was staggering. She played everything from a cold-blooded femme fatale to an English princess to a biblical-era Christian to a theatrical dreamer, all within the span of a single calendar year. This remarkable achievement apparently created serious confusion among Academy Award voters, who were faced with the unusual problem of having to choose which of Simmons's 5 performances deserved recognition. And many industry observers believe that the votes ended up splitting among her different roles. The National Board of Review actually gave Simmons their Best Actress award for her combined work across these films, recognizing that singling out just one performance would be unfair. But the Oscar voters never managed to coalesce around any single role strongly enough to give her a nomination. Fact 10. Perfectly timed for a real coronation. MGM's marketing department pulled off one of the most brilliantly timed film releases in Hollywood history by coordinating Young Bess to arrive in theaters at exactly the same moment that coronation fever was sweeping across Britain and much of the world. On June 2, 1953, the 27-year-old Princess Elizabeth was formally crowned as Queen Elizabeth II at Westminster Abbey in London, an event that captured the imagination of millions of people on both sides of the Atlantic and dominated newspaper headlines for weeks. MGM recognized this unprecedented public fascination with British royalty and strategically planned their release schedule so that audiences could watch a dramatized story about the first Queen Elizabeth while simultaneously celebrating the coronation of the second Queen Elizabeth, creating a perfect cultural moment that the studio exploited to maximum effect. The film had its London premiere on May 21, 1953, just 12 days before the actual coronation ceremony, and it also screened at Radio City Music Hall in New York before its wider American release on May 29th, ensuring that the movie would be fresh in everyone's minds during the coronation itself. To further capitalize on the royal celebrations, MGM arranged for a special charity premiere of Young Bess in Brighton, England, which was explicitly positioned as part of the official coronation festivities, allowing the film to become woven into the broader cultural celebration of the new monarch. This timing was no accident. MGM had been planning and adjusting their release schedule for months to ensure that their historical drama about young Elizabeth Tudor would arrive in theaters at precisely the moment when the entire world was focused on another Elizabeth ascending to the British throne, turning what could have been just another period drama into a major cultural event. Fact 11. Elizabeth Taylor almost got the crown. The casting process for Young Bess turned into an extended audition that stretched across nearly 8 years and involved some of the biggest names in Hollywood history before Jean Simmons finally won the role. MGM originally purchased the film rights to Margaret Irwin's novel back in 1945, but the studio struggled for years to find the perfect actress to portray the young Elizabeth Tudor, cycling through an impressive list of candidates that read like a who's who of Hollywood royalty. Elizabeth Taylor, who was still a teenager at the time of the early casting discussions in 1948, was seriously considered for the title role and even went through screen tests, which would have given her the chance to play a queen long before her later performances in Cleopatra. Greer Garson, who had won the Academy Award for Best Actress in 1942 for Mrs. Miniver and was MGM's reigning queen of dignified historical dramas, was also on the studio's shortlist and seemed like a natural choice for such a regal role. Deborah Kerr was considered so seriously that the studio discussed aging up the character if she took the part, since Kerr was older than the teenage princess that the story required, and Kerr would eventually appear in the film anyway, but in the supporting role of Catherine Parr rather than as Elizabeth herself. Perhaps most intriguingly, Vivien Leigh, who had a long-term contract with MGM and received the script, for her first refusal actually turned down the opportunity to play Elizabeth because she had acting commitments back in England that she couldn't break, making her one of the few actresses who voluntarily walked away from the role rather than losing it to someone else. Fact 12. Errol Flynn and Deborah Kerr's strange swap. In May of 1948, MGM made a confident public announcement that sent ripples through Hollywood, declaring that Errol Flynn and Deborah Kerr were definite for Young Bess and that the production would finally move forward after years of development delays. Flynn, who was famous for his swashbuckling roles in films like The Adventures of Robin Hood and Captain Blood, seemed like an exciting choice to play Thomas Seymour, the dashing naval admiral who becomes romantically entangled with the young Princess Elizabeth. Kerr, meanwhile, was being positioned to take on the title role of Elizabeth herself, which would have required the studio to age up the character significantly, since Kerr was in her late 20s and playing a teenager would have been a stretch. However, this seemingly solid casting arrangement completely fell apart as the months went by, and filming never proceeded with either Flynn or Kerr in their announced roles. When Young Bess finally went into production 4 years later in 1952, Flynn was nowhere to be found in the cast, having been replaced entirely by Stewart Granger, who brought a very different energy to the role of Thomas Seymour. Kerr, on the other hand, did eventually appear in the finished film, but in a dramatic reversal from the original plan, she was cast as Catherine Parr, Henry VIII's sixth and final wife, rather than as the young Elizabeth. This meant that Kerr went from being the intended star of the film to playing a supporting character, graciously accepting the smaller role and delivering a memorable performance as the gentle and kind stepmother who befriends Elizabeth and becomes caught in the dangerous romantic triangle at the heart of the story. Fact 13. The film lost money despite earning millions. Young Bess presents one of the most baffling examples of Hollywood accounting that has ever been documented, demonstrating how studio bookkeeping could somehow turn a profitable film into a financial loss on paper. The production cost MGM $2,423,000 to make, which was a substantial but not outrageous budget for a lavish Technicolor period drama in the early 1950s, and the film went on to earn $4,095,000 at the box office, which appears to be a healthy profit of over $1.5 million. However, according to MGM's official accounting records, Young Bess somehow lost the studio $272,000, creating a mathematical puzzle that left observers scratching their heads trying to figure out how a film that earned nearly twice its production budget could possibly end up in the red. The answer lies in the complicated world of Hollywood accounting, where studios added numerous hidden costs and expenses to a film's official budget that never appeared in the publicly announced production costs. These additional expenses included marketing and advertising costs, prints and distribution fees, overhead charges for using studio facilities and equipment, interest payments on borrowed production funds, and various other line items that could balloon a film's actual cost far beyond what was spent during production. Stewart Granger himself later named Young Bess as his favorite of all his MGM films, praising the costumes, the cast, and the story, and expressing genuine affection for the project despite its financial complications. The film's apparent loss on paper didn't stop it from being well received by audiences and critics, and it earned Academy Award nominations for Best Art Direction and Best Costume Design, proving that financial success and artistic achievement don't always align in the unpredictable world of Hollywood. Fact 14. Catherine Ann Porter's mysterious screenplay. One of the most intriguing mysteries surrounding Young Bess involves the participation of Catherine Ann Porter, a celebrated American author who would eventually win the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction in 1966 for her novel, The Collected Stories. In 1945, when MGM first purchased the film rights to Margaret Irwin's novel, the studio brought in Porter to work on the screenplay alongside a writer named Jan Lustig, and contemporary newspaper reports from that era specifically mention both writers as being involved in developing the script. Porter was already a highly respected literary figure by this time, known for her precise prose and psychological insight, and her involvement in a major Hollywood production seemed like a perfect match between serious literature and commercial filmmaking. However, when Young Bess finally made it to theaters 8 years later in 1953, Porter's name was nowhere to be found in the credits, which listed only John Lustig and Arthur Wimperis as the official screenwriters. What happened to Porter's work remains a complete mystery, and modern film historians have been unable to determine exactly how much she contributed to the final screenplay or why her involvement was erased from the production history. Some sources acknowledge that Porter did work on the script, but they always include the caveat that the extent of her contribution has never been determined, suggesting that her drafts either were completely rewritten by later writers or perhaps were set aside entirely when the project stalled for several years. The disappearance of Porter's work from Young Bess represents a frustrating gap in film history, especially given her literary stature, and leaves us wondering what a Catherine Ann Porter version of this Tudor drama might have looked like if her screenplay had made it to the screen. Fact 15. Too pretty for history. Gene Simmons nearly lost the role of Elizabeth Tudor because some MGM studio executives believed she possessed a quality that seemed like it should have been an advantage but was instead considered a serious problem. They thought she was simply too pretty to play the historically complex Tudor queen. The real Elizabeth I was known for having sharp, angular features with a long nose and a rather severe appearance, particularly as she aged, and historical portraits show a woman whose face reflected intelligence and strength rather than conventional beauty. Studio executives worried that Simmons, with her delicate features, expressive eyes, and natural elegance, looked nothing like the historical Elizabeth, and that audiences might reject her as miscast based purely on her appearance. This superficial concern almost derailed her casting, despite the fact that she had already proven herself as a remarkably talented actress through her Oscar-nominated performance as Ophelia in Laurence Olivier's Hamlet, and her memorable work in films like Great Expectations and Black Narcissus. The executives seemed to be prioritizing physical resemblance to historical portraits over acting ability, which was a particularly strange position to take, given that Hollywood had never been especially concerned with historical accuracy in its costume dramas. Fortunately, the decision-makers eventually recognized that Simmons's talent and screen presence were far more important than whether her nose matched Elizabeth's, and they gave her the role despite their initial reservations about her being too attractive. Simmons proved them right by delivering a nuanced performance that captured Elizabeth's intelligence, vulnerability, and growing strength, showing that great acting could transcend any concerns about physical appearance and that beauty didn't prevent an actress from portraying complexity and depth. Her casting ultimately demonstrated that talent should always win out over superficial physical concerns when it comes to bringing historical figures to life on screen.